The soft green glow of bioluminescent panels painted gentle shadows across the observation deck as the Kethran fleet moved through space like living whispers. Their ships resembled massive sea creatures more than traditional spacecraft, with hulls that pulsed rhythmically and fins that adjusted naturally to cosmic currents. These vessels had been grown, not built, cultivated in the great bioyards of their homeworld over decades of careful nurturing. Vel touched the warm, living wall of his ship and felt its contentment through the neural link that connected all Kethran explorers to their vessels. The creature ship hummed softly in response, a sound that meant everything was well. Around him, the observation deck curved in organic shapes, with windows that were actually transparent patches of the ship's skin, allowing perfect views of the starfield ahead. The 12 ships of the exploration fleet moved in perfect harmony, following migration patterns encoded in their genetic structure. Each vessel housed a crew of researchers, xenobiologists, and cultural specialists whose life work involved studying primitive civilizations from a respectful distance. The Kethrans had made this their sacred duty across 3 centuries of space exploration, never interfering, never revealing themselves, simply observing and learning. Their target system appeared unremarkable on the stellar charts. A yellow star with several rocky planets, one of which showed signs of complex life and early technology. The electromagnetic signatures suggested a species that had recently discovered radio waves and was taking its first tentative steps toward space travel. Perfect for a standard observation mission. Vel ran his elongated fingers across the bioconsole, feeling the ship's sensory organs extend outward to gather data. The Kethrans themselves were tall and graceful, with translucent skin that showed the slow pulse of their circulation, and large, compound eyes that could detect across multiple spectrums. Evolution had shaped them for deep space observation, and their technology reflected this natural ability. The planet they approached was beautiful. Swirling white clouds covered blue oceans and green-brown landmasses. The electromagnetic chatter from its surface indicated a bustling civilization, though still primitive by galactic standards. Radio transmissions carried what sounded like entertainment, communication, and early attempts at space coordination. The species called their world Earth and themselves humans. Research specialist Nyx floated over to the main viewing membrane, her excitement obvious in the way her skin's bioluminescence flickered. She had studied over 40 primitive civilizations during her career, and each first encounter still thrilled her. Through the biolink, Vel felt her anticipation mixing with the ship's own curiosity about this new world. The fleet maintained standard observation distance, far enough to remain undetected by primitive sensors but close enough for their bioships to gather detailed information. Their vessels naturally bent light around themselves, an evolutionary adaptation that made them nearly invisible against the cosmic background. To any human observers, this region of space would appear completely empty. Initial scans revealed a species in rapid technological development. The humans had basic satellites orbiting their planet, simple space stations, and were launching crude chemical rockets to explore their local system. Their technology was young but showed promise. Most interesting was their apparent drive to explore beyond their homeworld, despite obvious limitations in their propulsion systems. Dr. Tarn, the fleet's xenoarchaeologist, began cataloging human cultural patterns from their broadcast transmissions. The species seemed remarkably diverse, with multiple languages, competing nations, and varied belief systems. Yet they were beginning to cooperate on space ventures, suggesting they might eventually unite enough for interstellar travel in a few thousand years. The Kethran ships settled into standard observation formation, spreading out to cover different aspects of the human system. Some focused on the planet itself, studying atmospheric composition and biological diversity. Others examined the primitive space infrastructure, marveling at the humans' determination to reach beyond their gravity, while using such basic technology. Vel felt pleased with the mission's start. The humans appeared to be a typical emerging species, showing the curiosity and drive that might eventually lead them to join the greater galactic community. His report to the Science Council would note their potential for peaceful development, though it would likely be millennia before they developed enough to warrant direct contact. The bio-ship's sensory organs continued their patient work, gathering electromagnetic emissions, analyzing chemical signatures, and mapping gravitational anomalies throughout the system. Everything seemed routine and familiar. The humans were building exactly the kind of basic space infrastructure every species developed at this stage of their evolution. But as days passed, subtle anomalies began to appear in the data streams. There were unexplained energy signatures coming from the dark sides of several moons, brief electromagnetic pulses that didn't match known human technology, construction activity in locations where no construction should be possible with their primitive capabilities. Nyx brought these readings to Vel's attention, her bioluminescence shifting to patterns of confusion. The anomalies were probably nothing, she suggested, maybe natural phenomena they hadn't encountered before, but the ship's own sensory organs seemed unusually alert, as if they detected something that made them slightly uneasy. Vel decided to investigate more closely, confident in their fleet's stealth capabilities. The Kethrans had observed hundreds of species without ever being detected. Their bioships were masterpieces of evolutionary engineering, perfectly adapted for invisible observation. Whatever the humans were doing, they would study it safely from a distance and add it to their cultural files. The fleet began moving deeper into the human system, their living ships adjusting course with gentle muscular contractions. None of them suspected they were about to encounter something that would challenge everything they knew about technological development and the nature of emerging civilizations. The humans were about to show them that some species developed along paths that defied all conventional understanding. 3 weeks had passed since the Kethran fleet began their observation mission, and the routine had become comfortable. The bioships drifted lazily through space, their living hulls warm and content as they gathered data about human civilization. Each day brought new discoveries about this young species and their determined efforts to explore beyond their homeworld. Nyx spent most of her time in the sensory chamber, a spherical room at the heart of her assigned vessel, where she could directly interface with the ship's nervous system. Her consciousness merged partially with the bioship's awareness, allowing her to experience space through senses far more sophisticated than her natural ones. It was in this state of expanded perception that she first noticed something was wrong. The anomaly appeared as a flutter in the electromagnetic spectrum, like a shadow moving behind a bright light. At first, she dismissed it as interference from Earth's magnetic field, but the pattern was too regular, too purposeful. Something near the moon was generating energy signatures that didn't match anything in their extensive databases of known technologies. She pulled her consciousness back from the ship's sensory network, feeling the familiar disorientation that came with returning to her individual awareness. The bioluminescent panels around her pulsed gently, responding to her elevated stress levels. Through the ship's internal communication system, she sent an urgent request to meet with Vel. Thut, Fleet Commander received her report in his private chamber, a cozy space that curved around him like a protective cocoon. As Nyx described the strange readings, Vel felt his ship's own concern through their neural link. The vessel's ancient instincts were picking up something that made it uneasy, though it couldn't identify the threat. Together, they reviewed the data streams flowing from all 12 ships in the fleet. The anomalies were subtle but consistent. Energy patterns that suggested massive construction projects hidden from normal observation. Gravitational disturbances that indicated objects far larger than anything humans should be capable of building. Most disturbing were the electromagnetic bursts that seemed to follow no known physical principles. Vel made the decision to investigate more closely, though something deep in his ship's consciousness urged caution. The bio-vessel's evolutionary memory carried warnings about approaching unknown phenomena, but scientific curiosity overrode ancient fears. They would move in carefully, using their natural stealth capabilities to observe whatever the humans were hiding. The fleet repositioned itself, sliding through space with the fluid grace of deep-sea creatures. Their bioships naturally absorbed and deflected sensor beams, making them effectively invisible to primitive detection systems. As they approached the lunar region where the anomalies were strongest, their living hulls began reporting increasingly strange readings. What they discovered defied all expectations about human technological development. Hidden in vast craters, On the moon's far side were construction facilities that dwarfed anything visible from Earth. Massive structures stretched across kilometers, built with materials that seemed to bend light around them in impossible ways. The scale was overwhelming, larger than entire Kethran cities. Dr. Tarn's analysis equipment, grown specifically for studying alien technologies, struggled to categorize what they were seeing. The construction techniques appeared to violate several basic principles of engineering that governed all known galactic civilizations. The humans hadn't just hidden these facilities from Earth-based observers. They had somehow built them using methods that shouldn't exist. The most shocking discovery came when they realized these weren't research stations or mining operations. The structures were shipyards, and the vessels under construction were unlike anything in their cultural databases. Each ship appeared to be at least as large as a Kethran exploration vessel, but covered in protrusions and arrays that could only be weapon systems. Nyx's bioship began showing signs of stress as it processed the implications. The living vessel's skin developed a slight tremor, and its bioluminescence shifted to warning colors. Through their neural link, she felt the ship's confusion and growing alarm. This was not the primitive species they had come to study. The humans had somehow leapfrogged past technological barriers that took most species thousands of years to overcome. They had gone from chemical rockets to advanced shipbuilding in what appeared to be mere decades. The energy signatures from their construction facilities suggested they had mastered technologies that the Galactic Council considered theoretical, at best. As the Kethran fleet watched from what they hoped was a safe distance, automated systems throughout the lunar facilities began activating. Massive doors opened in the sides of craters, revealing construction bays that had been hidden, even from their sophisticated sensors. Inside those bays, something vast and dark was taking shape. Vel felt his ship's terror through their neural connection as the first human warship began to emerge from its hidden construction bay. The vessel was massive, bristling with weapon systems that registered as threats to every survival instinct his bioship possessed. This wasn't a species taking tentative steps into space. This was a military force that had been building in secret, preparing for something the Kethrans couldn't begin to understand. The peaceful observation mission had become something else entirely. They were no longer studying a primitive civilization. They had stumbled upon a species that had somehow compressed centuries of technological development into decades, and what they had chosen to build first was an instrument of war on a scale that violated every galactic treaty regarding weapons of mass destruction. As more construction bays began opening around the lunar surface, the Kethran fleet realized they were witnessing the birth of something that would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The humans weren't just building ships. They were creating an entirely new class of warfare, using technologies that shouldn't exist and following no known patterns of civilizational development. The hidden lunar facilities erupted into activity, as if responding to some invisible signal from Earth. Lights that had been dark for unknown periods suddenly blazed to life, illuminating construction bays that stretched deep into the moon's core. The Kethran fleet watched in growing horror as what they had mistaken for natural crater formations revealed themselves to be carefully disguised manufacturing complexes. Automated systems moved with terrifying precision throughout the facilities. Massive mechanical arms, each larger than a Kethran exploration vessel, began final assembly procedures on projects that had been hidden in shadow. The scale of construction was overwhelming, suggesting the humans had been working on these projects for far longer than their apparent technological development should have allowed. The first completed warship began its emergence from the primary construction bay with mechanical precision that seemed almost organic in its smoothness. What had appeared to be support scaffolding retracted to reveal the vessel's true form, and the sight sent waves of instinctive terror through every bioship in the Kethran fleet. Their living vessels had never encountered anything like this. Artificial predator. The human warship measured nearly 5 kilometers in length, its hull composed of materials that seemed to absorb light while simultaneously reflecting it in patterns that hurt to observe directly. The surface was covered in geometric designs that suggested both defensive armor and offensive weapon systems, arranged in configurations that violated traditional ship design principles, while somehow appearing perfectly functional. Vel felt his ship's neural pathways flooding with alarm signals as the creature vessel tried to process what it was seeing. The bioship's evolutionary memory contained warnings about artificial constructs, but nothing in its genetic programming had prepared it for something of this scale and apparent capability. Through their link, Vel experienced the ship's confusion and growing panic. The human vessel's activation sequence began with a low harmonic that seemed to resonate through space itself. Energy patterns, unlike anything in the Kethran database, started flowing across its hull, creating lines of force that made nearby asteroids drift away as if pushed by invisible hands. The ship was doing something to local spacetime that their instruments couldn't properly measure. Dr. Tarn's analysis equipment, overwhelmed by readings that exceeded its design parameters, began reporting impossible energy densities and exotic matter signatures. The human warship wasn't just large and heavily armed. It appeared to be using principles of physics that the Galactic Council considered purely theoretical. They had weaponized forces that most civilizations used only for basic research. Communications Officer Ral intercepted human transmissions identifying the vessel as Titan's Wrath, though the designation seemed inadequate for something of such overwhelming presence. The intercepted data streams revealed this wasn't even their most advanced design, merely the first of a new class that would reshape interstellar warfare. The humans had built an entire fleet in secret. As Titan's Wrath achieved full power status, space around it began exhibiting properties that violated conventional physics. Light bent in unnatural ways near its hull, and gravitational readings suggested the ship was somehow manipulating its own mass in real time. The weapon systems alone generated energy signatures that could sterilize entire star systems with careful application. The Kethran fleet's bioships began showing signs of severe stress as their living nervous systems tried to process the impossibility before them. Bioluminescent patterns across their hulls shifted to deep warning colors, and several vessels started involuntary retreat maneuvers as their survival instincts overrode crew commands. The ships recognized something their organic brains couldn't properly categorize. More human vessels began emerging from hidden construction bays throughout the lunar complex, each one representing a quantum leap beyond known military technology. Cruisers that moved like living things despite being clearly artificial. Destroyers that seemed to phase in and out of normal space. Support ships that generated their own localized gravitational fields for reasons the Kethrans couldn't understand. The humans had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had compressed thousands of years of technological development into mere decades, focusing their efforts not on peaceful exploration or cultural advancement, but on creating instruments of war that transcended current understanding of what was possible. Every ship they had built challenged fundamental assumptions about technology and physics. Nyx watched through her ship's sensory network as the human fleet began formation maneuvers that defied the basic principles of momentum and inertia. Ships, weighing millions of tons, turned instantaneously, accelerated without visible thrust sources, and moved in patterns that suggested they had solved problems that had puzzled galactic engineers for millennia. They weren't just advanced, they were operating under completely different rules. The most terrifying aspect was the efficiency of their movements. Every action served multiple purposes. Every maneuver demonstrated capabilities that could be applied both defensively and offensively. The humans hadn't just built powerful warships, they had created a new paradigm of space combat that made traditional fleet tactics obsolete before the battle even began. As the human fleet completed its emergence from the lunar facilities, the Kethran observers realized they were witnessing something that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. This wasn't a species preparing to join the galactic community as a peaceful member. This was the emergence of an apex predator that had been preparing for interstellar conflict, using methods no one had thought possible. The peaceful observation mission had become something far more significant. They were the first witnesses to humanity's true capability, and what they had seen would terrify every established civilization in the galaxy once their report reached the Science Council. The moment Titan's Wrath achieved full operational power, something unprecedented happened throughout the Kethran exploration fleet. Every bioship simultaneously lost the ability to move, their living propulsion systems shutting down in response. to stimuli that triggered the deepest survival instincts encoded in their genetic structure. The creature vessels had encountered something their evolutionary programming recognized as an ultimate predator. Vel felt the terror flooding through his ship's nervous system as the bio-vessel's consciousness retreated into a protective trance state. The neural link that normally allowed seamless communication between crew and ship became a conduit for pure instinctual fear. His vessel, like all the others in the fleet, had detected something so threatening that its only response was complete stillness. Hoping to avoid notice through absolute immobility, the paralysis was total and involuntary. Control surfaces that normally responded to the slightest mental command became completely unresponsive. Navigation systems that had functioned flawlessly for decades went dormant as the ship's biological components focused all energy on survival. Even basic life support systems reduced to minimal function, leaving crews in dimly lit chambers with barely adequate air circulation. Across the fleet, identical scenes played out as 12 crews found themselves prisoners within their own vessels. The bioship's consciousness had locked out all crew commands, overriding years of training and partnership in favor of primitive survival responses that recognized the human warship as something beyond their ability to escape or confront. The living vessels were protecting their crews in the only way they knew how. Through the limited sensory input still available, the Kethrans could only watch as Titan's wrath began demonstrating capabilities that their instruments struggled to record. The massive warship moved through space with a grace that seemed impossible for something of its size, turning without reaction mass and accelerating without visible thrust sources. Each maneuver sent waves of exotic energy through local space that caused their bioships to shudder deeper into paralysis. The human vessel's weapon systems began cycling through activation sequences that generated readings off the scale of Kethran measurement devices. Energy patterns flowed across its hull in configurations that suggested the ship could manipulate fundamental forces as easily as traditional weapons discharged projectiles. The vessel wasn't just armed, it had weaponized physics itself in ways that shouldn't be possible. Dr. Tarn's instruments, still functioning despite her ship's paralysis, detected energy signatures that violated everything she knew about technological development. The humans had somehow mastered controlled space-time distortion, weaponized gravity manipulation, and something her sensors could only classify as aggressive entropy modification. They had turned the basic forces that governed reality into tools of warfare. More human vessels emerged from hidden positions throughout the solar system, each one representing technologies that the Galactic Council had deemed impossible or too dangerous to pursue. Cruisers that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Destroyers that could apparently make sections of space cease to exist. Support ships that generated their own pocket universes for storing ammunition and supplies. The paralyzed Kethran fleet could only observe as the human warships began formation exercises that demonstrated their complete mastery over conventional physics. Ships phases through each other without collision, appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, and moved in patterns that suggested they had solved faster-than-light travel in ways that didn't require traditional jump drives or warp systems. Nyx felt her ship's terror through their neural link as the human fleet demonstrated weapon systems that could apparently delete matter from existence, create artificial black holes for tactical purposes, and manipulate time flow in localized areas. These weren't just advanced weapons. They were applications of physics that most civilizations considered purely theoretical and far too dangerous to attempt. The most horrifying realization was that everything they were witnessing appeared to be routine training exercises for the human crews. The impossible maneuvers were performed with casual precision, suggesting these weren't experimental prototypes but fully operational warships crewed by personnel who considered reality-bending technology to be standard equipment. The humans had not only mastered impossible physics, they had made it mundane. Communication between the paralyzed Kethran ships became nearly impossible as their biovessels' organic communication systems shut down to avoid any electromagnetic emissions that might attract the attention of the human predators. The crews were isolated within their frozen ships, each experiencing the same mixture of terror and awe as they watched a demonstration of power that redefined what was possible in the universe. Vel realized that his fleet had stumbled upon something that would change the galactic balance of power forever. The humans weren't just another emerging civilization preparing to join the galactic community. They were an entirely new category of species that had approached technological development from angles no one had considered, focusing their efforts on mastering warfare in ways that made traditional military thinking obsolete. The human fleet continued its exercises with mechanical precision, each maneuver revealing new capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about space combat, physics, and the limitations of technology. They had created ships that were less vehicles than they were localized alterations to reality, crewed by beings who had apparently decided that the laws of physics were merely suggestions to be overcome through sufficient engineering determination. The demonstration continued. The Kethran bioships remained locked in their protective paralysis, their living nervous systems overwhelmed by the recognition that they had encountered something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had achieved technological transcendence not through gradual development over millennia, but through a concentrated effort that had compressed impossible advancement into mere decades of focused research and development. Admiral Stone stood in the command center of Titan's Wrath, watching holographic displays that showed the complete tactical picture of his solar system. The bridge around him hummed with quiet efficiency, its surfaces alive with flowing data, streams and three-dimensional tactical projections that would have seemed like magic to humans from just 50 years earlier. But technology advanced quickly when survival depended on it. The alien bioships had been detected the moment they entered the outer system, tracked by sensor networks that appeared to be simple communication satellites to casual observation. Earth's deep space monitoring had evolved far beyond what any external observer might expect, hidden within infrastructure that seemed primitively normal to anyone not looking carefully enough. Stone had been waiting for this moment since taking command of humanity's first true warship. The paralyzed alien vessels represented the first test of human military doctrine against actual galactic civilization, and their reaction exceeded every projection his strategists had developed. The aliens weren't just shocked by human capabilities, they were literally unable to function in the presence of human military technology. Through quantum communication links that operated faster than light itself, Stone received updates from similar facilities hidden throughout the solar system. Mars contained shipyards that dwarfed the lunar construction bays. The asteroid belt hosted mining and manufacturing operations that had transformed entire planetoids into automated weapons factories. Even the outer planets concealed military installations that could produce fleet-scale forces in months rather than years. The human approach to technological development had been fundamentally different from any species in the galactic database. Where others saw impossible barriers, human scientists had seen engineering challenges to be solved through determination and innovative thinking. Where other civilizations accepted natural limitations, humans had systematically eliminated those limitations through technological transcendence. Dr. Rodriguez, the chief science officer aboard Titan's Wrath, provided real-time analysis of the alien bioships as they remained locked in their protective paralysis. The vessels were remarkable examples of organic engineering, grown rather than built, but their evolutionary programming had never encountered anything like human military technology. Their survival instincts had correctly identified humans as an apex predator species. The demonstration had been carefully planned to reveal human capabilities in stages, allowing the alien observers to fully comprehend what they were witnessing. Each weapon system activation, every impossible maneuver, all the physics-defying technologies had been displayed in sequence designed to overwhelm any attempt at rational explanation through conventional understanding of technological development. Stone activated the fleet-wide communication system, addressing the human crews who had spent years training for this moment. The revelation of humanity's true capabilities to the galactic community had always been planned as a controlled event, but having actual alien observers made it more significant than any simulation could have provided. The human fleet's maneuvers weren't just demonstrations of superior technology. They were proof of concept for military doctrines that assumed conflict with civilizations possessing technologies beyond current human understanding. Every ship had been designed to fight enemies who might have centuries more experience, using tactics and weapons that hadn't been invented yet. Commander Park, monitoring the tactical situation from her position aboard the destroyer Absolute. 0 reported that the alien bioships were showing signs of gradual recovery from their paralysis. Their organic nervous systems were slowly adapting to the presence of human technology, though they remained completely unable to move or respond to their crew's commands. The humans had achieved something unprecedented in their brief history of space exploration. They had compressed thousands of years of technological development into decades through focused research programs that accepted no limitations and refused to consider any problem unsolvable. The results had exceeded even their own projections for what might be possible. Stone made the decision to initiate direct contact with the alien observers, though he knew the psychological impact would be significant. The aliens had come to study what they assumed was a primitive species taking tentative steps into space exploration. Instead, they had encountered a civilization that had already transcended conventional understanding of physics and engineering. The communication beam from Titan's Wrath penetrated the alien bioship's organic hulls without difficulty, delivering a message in mathematical concepts that any spacefaring species would understand. The content was simple but profound, designed to establish peaceful intentions while demonstrating technological superiority that made any aggressive response completely futile. Vel received the human transmission through his bioships gradually, recovering communication systems, and the message fundamentally changed his understanding of what his fleet had discovered. The humans weren't revealing their capabilities as a threat. They were offering first contact on terms that demonstrated humanity's position as the dominant military force in this region of space. The fleet of paralyzed Kethran bioships slowly began recovering basic functions as their organic nervous systems adapted to the presence of human technology, but the psychological impact remained overwhelming. They had encountered a species that didn't just participate in galactic civilization, they had transcended it through pure technological determination and an acceptance of warfare that most peaceful species found incomprehensible. Admiral Stone's image appeared on communication screens throughout the alien fleet, his expression calm and professional, despite the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Behind him, the command center of Titan's Wrath displayed tactical information that casually referenced technologies the aliens hadn't known were possible. The message was brief, but contained implications that would reshape galactic politics forever. Humanity was extending an invitation to peaceful first contact, but the demonstration had made clear that this invitation was being offered from a position of absolute strength. The humans had built a military capability that could enforce their diplomatic preferences across interstellar distances. The Kethran observation fleet found themselves facing a choice that no previous first contact mission had ever encountered. They could return to the Galactic Council with news of a species that had achieved technological transcendence through military innovation, or they could accept humanity's invitation to establish relationships based on mutual respect, backed by overwhelming human superiority. As the human fleet powered down to non-threatening levels, the aliens realized they hadn't discovered a primitive civilization ready for guidance into galactic society. They had found the future apex predator of known space, a species that built weapons like artwork and treated the conquest of impossible physics as routine engineering projects.